Sometimes, the strongest love stories never actually begin. Not because the feelings aren't real, not because the connection is imagined, but because one person stays quiet for so long that silence itself becomes the relationship. And I think, deep down, there's someone in your life you already feel this about. Someone whose behavior doesn't fully make sense to you. They pull closer, then disappear. They watch you carefully when they think you're not looking. They remember small details you forgot you ever said. And every time you start convincing yourself, no, I'm probably imagining it, something happens that pulls you right back into the question again. Because people can hide words, but feelings? Feelings leak. Before we go deeper, if you've ever had a connection that stayed in your mind longer than it should have, subscribe. Not for me, for the part of you that already knows this video is hitting somewhere uncomfortable, somewhere real. Because what nobody tells men is this: a woman who loves you silently does not behave normally. She becomes emotionally divided against herself. Part of her wants to protect her pride. Part of her wants to protect her heart. And another part, the dangerous part, wants you to notice without her having to say it. That inner conflict creates behavior that feels confusing from the outside. And honestly, most men completely miss it. Not because they're stupid, because they're looking for obvious signals while she's fighting a private emotional war. See, when a woman's feelings become too strong to hide, she doesn't suddenly become smooth and confident. Usually the opposite happens. She becomes hyper-aware of you. Your mood changes her mood. Your attention affects her energy. One delayed reply from you can sit in her chest for hours while she pretends she doesn't care, and she hates that. That's the part men rarely understand. A woman who is quietly falling for you often feels angry at herself while it's happening, because she didn't plan it. Especially if she's emotionally intelligent, self-controlled, independent, the kind of woman who normally keeps herself composed. You become the interruption she didn't expect, and suddenly she's replaying conversations at night, reading your tone too carefully, wondering why your approval matters more than it should. She notices when another woman gets your attention, not openly, not dramatically, but internally. It stings in a way she cannot logically explain to herself. So she compensates. She acts slightly colder sometimes, more distant, less available. And if you're a man who's used to straightforward behavior, this is where you get confused. You think, if she cared, wouldn't she make it obvious? No, not always. Because silent love is full of contradictions. She wants closeness, but fears exposure. She wants reassurance, but doesn't want to look needy. She wants to know if you feel it too, without risking the humiliation of being wrong. So instead, she studies you. And you can always tell when someone is emotionally studying you. They react to things you barely remember saying. They notice changes in your energy before other people do. They become unusually present around you, even when they pretend to be casual. It's subtle, but intense. And there's something else you need to understand. Something deeper. When feelings stay hidden too long, they don't fade peacefully. They build pressure. That's why eventually, the mask starts cracking in tiny moments. A look that lingers too long. A sudden emotional reaction that seems disproportionate. A moment where she almost says something vulnerable, then quickly pulls back and changes the subject. Those moments matter, because silence has limits. And when someone has loved you quietly for a long time, eventually their emotions stop asking for permission to appear. There's a moment that happens before someone admits they love you. Most people never notice it. It's not a confession. It's not flirting. It's not even physical. It's when they start emotionally orbiting you without realizing they're doing it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll notice she starts finding reasons to stay connected to your world even when she doesn't need to. A random message that could have waited. A small excuse to check in. A conversation she stretches just a little longer than necessary. Not because she's trying to manipulate you, because emotionally attached people crave presence before they crave romance. That's the stage nobody talks about. The attachment forms quietly first, long before labels, long before honesty, long before either person fully understands what's happening. And the strange thing is, she may actually fight the connection harder the deeper it gets, especially if she's been hurt before. A woman who's experienced disappointment in love rarely trusts her emotions immediately. She questions them, analyzes them, tries to control them. So externally, she may look calm. Internally, she's having entire conversations with herself about you that you'll never hear. Why do I care this much? Why did that affect me? Why am I thinking about him again? And sometimes, she distances herself not because the feelings disappeared, but because they became too real. Men misread this all the time. You think distance means disinterest, but emotional withdrawal can also happen when someone feels themselves losing emotional control. Because love, real love, not fantasy, is vulnerable. It exposes insecurities people thought they had buried years ago. Suddenly she cares whether you lose interest, whether you compare her to someone else, whether she matters to you in the same quiet way you matter to her. And here's where it becomes psychologically complicated. A woman hiding strong feelings often becomes incredibly observant while pretending to be emotionally neutral. She watches patterns. Your tone with her versus other people, how quickly you respond, whether your eyes soften around her, whether you remember details about her life. And she notices more than you think, much more. Women are often taught to pay attention to emotional subtleties for safety, connection, and self-protection. So when feelings get involved, that awareness intensifies. That's why she'll sometimes react emotionally to things you thought were insignificant. A short response, a shift in energy, a moment of emotional distance. To you, it was nothing. To her nervous system, it felt personal. But she probably won't tell you that. Instead, she'll say she's tired, busy, distracted. Because admitting emotional sensitivity feels terrifying when the relationship itself is still undefined. And honestly, undefined connections create the deepest emotional confusion. No clear rejection, no clear commitment, just tension. Tension is powerful. It keeps people emotionally awake at night. That's why these silent connections become so psychologically consuming. The brain starts filling in blanks, replaying interactions, searching for certainty. And if she's emotionally invested enough, you slowly become part of her internal world. Not in an obsessive movie-style way, in a human way. You cross her mind during ordinary moments, driving home, standing in line somewhere, hearing a phrase you use, listening to music that suddenly reminds her of your energy. That's when hidden feelings become dangerous to contain, because eventually, emotions want expression. And when someone suppresses affection for too long, it starts leaking out sideways. In jealousy, in overthinking, in emotional reactions that surprise even them. You'll see it in the way her composure slips when another woman gets too close to you. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it's microscopic. A change in tone, a quieter mood, a sudden withdrawal she can't fully explain. And afterward, she'll probably feel embarrassed with herself, because now she has evidence. Evidence that this connection has already gone deeper than she intended. You want to know the part that affects her the most? It's not the fear of rejection. It's the fear that she imagined the connection more deeply than you did. That fear changes everything. Because once a woman starts emotionally attaching to someone in silence, she becomes trapped between two painful possibilities. If I say nothing, I may lose him. But if I say something, and I was wrong, I lose my dignity too. And that second fear is heavier than most men realize, especially for women who appear emotionally composed on the outside. The women who seem calm, mature, hard to read, they often feel things very deeply, but privately. They don't want to hand someone emotional power carelessly, so instead of confessing directly, they start testing emotional safety in small ways, very small ways. She'll hint at vulnerability, then immediately retreat. She'll ask subtle questions about your relationships. She'll become unusually attentive when you talk about your future, your loneliness, your struggles. Not because she's collecting information casually, because emotionally invested people are always trying to answer one terrifying question. Is there space for me in your emotional world? That's really what she's searching for, and sometimes You unknowingly become the reason she starts questioning herself more deeply than she has in years. Because attraction is easy, but emotional safety? That's rare. A man who makes a woman feel emotionally seen without trying too hard becomes incredibly difficult to forget, especially if he's inconsistent without meaning to be. That combination is brutal psychologically. Warmth, followed by distance. Attention, followed by ambiguity. The human brain attaches harder to uncertainty than certainty. That's not manipulation. That's psychology. Unclear emotional rewards create obsession loops in the mind. That's why she replays moments with you. The look you gave her one night, the softness in your voice that one conversation. The moment your guard dropped and she saw something real in you. Men underestimate how deeply women remember emotional texture. Not just words, texture. The feeling of your presence, the emotional atmosphere around you. The moments where you accidentally revealed pain, loneliness, tenderness, restraint. Those moments stay with her. And if she loves you silently, she studies contradictions. Because contradictions reveal truth. Maybe you act emotionally detached, but your eyes change when she walks away. Maybe you say you don't care much about relationships, but you become protective around her without realizing it. Maybe you keep emotional walls up with everyone else, except her. She notices, quietly, and the more evidence she collects, the harder it becomes for her to emotionally escape the connection. But here's where things become emotionally dangerous. Silence creates fantasy. Not fake fantasy, human fantasy. When two people avoid honesty for too long, they begin building emotional stories inside their own minds. That's why simple interactions start carrying enormous emotional weight. A longer hug feels meaningful. A late-night conversation feels intimate. A moment of eye contact becomes almost unbearable. And neither person fully says what's happening. So the tension grows, slowly, until eventually the emotional restraint itself becomes exhausting. You'll see it in her eyes first. That's usually where hidden feelings lose control. A woman can manage her words. She can manage her behavior. She can even manage distance for a while. But sustained emotional attachment changes the way someone looks at you. There's softness there, attention, a kind of emotional exposure she didn't intend to reveal. And sometimes she catches herself doing it. That sudden look away, that awkward shift in energy after a vulnerable moment. That's not random. That's someone realizing their feelings are becoming visible. And what makes this so emotionally intense is that part of her secretly wants you to notice. Not because she wants power over you, because carrying unspoken love alone becomes unbearably lonely after a while. The loneliness of silent love is difficult to explain unless you've lived it. Because from the outside, life keeps moving normally. She still goes to work, still laughs at conversations, still answers messages, still functions. But internally, there's a constant emotional undercurrent tied to you. And what makes it exhausting is this. She can never fully relax around the uncertainty. Every interaction becomes emotionally amplified. If you're warm with her, she carries that warmth for hours afterward without telling anyone. If you seem distracted or distant, she'll wonder what changed even if nothing actually did. That's what emotional attachment does when it's hidden instead of expressed. It turns ordinary moments into emotional evidence. And eventually, she starts watching herself around you. That's a huge sign, by the way. When someone becomes deeply self-aware in your presence, feelings are usually involved. She notices her tone more, her body language, how much she smiles. Whether she's revealing too much. Because now there's something at risk emotionally. And the strangest part? The more she tries to appear unaffected, the more unnatural she sometimes becomes. You'll notice flashes of contradiction. One day she feels deeply connected to you. The next, she acts more reserved. Then suddenly she's warm again. That inconsistency isn't always a game. Sometimes it's emotional self-protection happening in real time. People pull away when feelings make them feel exposed, especially if they sense they're becoming emotionally dependent on moments with you. That realization scares people. More than rejection sometimes. Because dependency creates vulnerability. Now your attention matters too much. Your approval matters too much. Your presence affects her emotional state more than she wants to admit. And if she's psychologically mature, she'll notice it happening, which means she may actively try to regain control of herself. She'll become busier, more emotionally disciplined, less available. Not because the feelings faded, because they didn't. That's the problem. And if you've ever felt confused by someone becoming distant right after moments of closeness, understand this carefully. Sometimes people retreat after emotional intimacy because intimacy confirmed the depth of their feelings. Not because it meant nothing, because it meant too much. There's also another layer men rarely see. When a woman silently loves someone, she often grieves things that haven't even happened yet. Read that again slowly. She imagines losing you before she even has you. That's why certain moments hit her harder than they appear to. Seeing another woman around you, feeling emotionally replaceable, watching you become distant. Those moments awaken fear she's been trying to suppress quietly. And no, she may not explode emotionally over it. Real emotional attachment is often quieter than people think. Sometimes pain shows up as silence, a softer voice, a delayed reply, a subtle emotional withdrawal. Because mature people often hide heartbreak while it's actively happening. And honestly, some women become incredibly good at pretending they're fine. That's what makes silent love so psychologically intense. The outside and inside stop matching. Externally, she says, "It's not a big deal." Internally, she feels your emotional absence in places she can't explain logically. And eventually, the pressure starts escaping through honesty she didn't plan to reveal. Tiny truths, accidental truths. She asks if you've ever thought about settling down. She wonders aloud what kind of relationship actually lasts. She becomes more emotionally sincere with you than with other people. These are not random conversations. People reveal their heart indirectly before they reveal it directly, always. And if her feelings are becoming too strong to hide, eventually you'll feel a shift in the emotional atmosphere between you. A heaviness. Not bad heaviness, just truth trying to surface. Because human beings are not designed to hide deep emotional attachment forever. At some point, the heart gets tired of speaking in hints. And when the heart gets tired enough, something changes. The performance starts slipping. Not dramatically, not like a movie scene where someone suddenly confesses in the rain. Real emotional exposure is usually quieter than that. It happens in moments where restraint fails for just a second. A pause that lasts too long. A look that carries too much emotion. A question that sounds casual, but clearly isn't. That's when you realize this connection has been affecting her far more deeply than she ever admitted. And honestly, that realization can be overwhelming for both people. Because once hidden feelings become visible, even slightly, the relationship can never fully go back to emotional neutrality. Now there's awareness, and awareness changes everything. You begin noticing her differently too. The nervousness she tries to hide, the way her energy shifts around you compared to other people, the emotional sensitivity underneath her composure. You start realizing she wasn't hard to read. She was trying not to be read at all. There's a difference. A woman protecting her emotions often becomes emotionally indirect, not because she enjoys confusion, but because direct vulnerability feels unbearably risky when someone truly matters to her. That's why men sometimes misjudge emotionally invested women as mixed signals. But mixed signals often come from mixed internal emotions. Desire fighting fear, hope fighting self-protection, attachment fighting pride. And pride is a powerful thing, especially when someone has already survived emotional disappointment before. People who've been hurt deeply rarely approach love carelessly again. They become controlled, measured, watchful. But love has a way of disrupting control eventually. That's why her reactions may start becoming more emotionally honest over time. You'll hear it in her voice first. A softness she doesn't use with everyone. An emotional patience with you that surprises even her. Moments where she sounds genuinely hurt by your distance before quickly pretending she's fine again. And those moments matter because emotions usually surface before words do. Long before someone says, "I love you," their nervous system has already been revealing it quietly. Through attention, through emotional investment, through sensitivity to your presence. That's the truth most people ignore. Love is visible long before it becomes verbal. And when feelings become too strong to hide, the body starts betraying the secret. Her eyes search your reactions more carefully. Her mood responds to your energy more intensely. Her emotional walls weaken in unpredictable moments. You may notice she becomes unusually honest late at night, then emotionally guarded again the next day. That's not fake. Night lowers emotional defenses. Loneliness becomes louder at night. Attachment becomes harder to suppress. People say things they normally keep buried. Then morning comes, and pride returns. So she regains composure, but the truth already leaked out. And I think that's the part that hurts the most about silent love. Both people often feel it long before either one feels safe enough to name it. So they circle each other emotionally, waiting, testing, hoping the other person will make certainty possible. Meanwhile, the connection keeps deepening underneath the silence, until eventually, even other people can feel it. That tension when you're together, that unusual attentiveness, the emotional charge in simple interactions. Because genuine emotional attachment creates gravity, and gravity is difficult to hide forever, especially when someone has spent months, maybe years, trying to act unaffected by a person who quietly became important to them. There's a point where silence stops protecting you and starts exposing you. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in the smallest, most inconvenient ways. You might catch it in how she looks at you when she thinks you're not paying attention. Not the social version of her, not the composed one, the one that appears for half a second before she corrects herself. And in that half second, there's usually everything she's been trying not to say. Here's what most men misunderstand about that moment. It's not about confession yet. It's about emotional exhaustion. Because holding strong feelings inside someone you see regularly, it drains something over time. Not dramatically, but steadily, like pressure building in a closed room. At first, she can manage it. She adjusts. She distances a little. She regains control. But emotions don't stay neatly contained just because someone is disciplined. They resurface in unexpected places. In her patience with you. In how quickly she forgives small things. In how deeply she reacts to things she shouldn't care about. And eventually, something subtle shifts. She stops trying as hard to hide the fact that you matter. That doesn't mean she confesses. It means the effort of pretending becomes heavier than the fear of being seen. And that's a quiet turning point. You might notice she starts being slightly more direct. Not fully open, but less guarded than before. She stops over-editing her reactions around you. She lets moments breathe instead of controlling them so tightly. And emotionally, that's huge. Because people don't relax their emotional control unless something inside them has already decided, this matters more than my fear. But here's where it becomes even more human and a little unsettling. When someone has loved in silence for too long, they don't just fear rejection. They fear being late. Late to be understood. Late to be chosen. Late to be seen clearly while it still matters. That fear creates a kind of emotional urgency they don't always show on the surface. It might come out as a sudden seriousness in conversation, or a moment where she looks at you like she's deciding whether to finally risk honesty, or a quiet withdrawal right after closeness, because closeness reminded her how real this is becoming. And if you're attentive enough, you start realizing something important. This was never just confusion. It was care trying to find a safe way to exist. But safety and silence don't coexist forever. At some point, something has to give. Either the truth is spoken, or the distance becomes permanent enough that the feeling has nowhere left to go. And I think that's what makes this dynamic so emotionally heavy, because deep down, both people usually sense the same thing. This isn't random. This isn't meaningless. This is something that has already affected both of us more than we've admitted. And when two people reach that point, even without words, the connection changes shape. It becomes harder to ignore, harder to reset, harder to pretend it's just normal anymore. Not because it's guaranteed to become a relationship, but because emotional truth, once felt deeply, doesn't disappear just because it wasn't spoken in time. It stays, quietly, until something finally brings it into the open, or quietly lets it fade into the category of what could have been.